Today I'm sewing and sharing a beautiful little dress for your little women. I'm sewing the smallest size today, but the pattern ranges from 1 year to 14 years. I used to gather up all my scraps after making outfits for myself, and then whip up these dresses in the smallest sizes and sell them at craft fairs. Of all the little projects that I used to sell at the craft fair, this dress was by far the most popular. I've also sewn it many times for newborn baby girls of friends and family as it makes an awesome baby shower gift. This is the Lantana dress by P&E Patterns, and I've left the link below so that you can check it out, grab a copy, and sew it along with me. There are a few views available to choose from, and the fact that it has so many different little pieces allows for great color blocking opportunities. So let's get started sewing the Lantana dress. Apply interfacing to both of your cuffs, both of your button plackets, and one of your collar pieces. Grab your uninterfaced collar piece. This will be considered your main collar piece, the one that will be visible when the dress is worn, and press the bottom edge of this collar to the wrong side by 1/2 inch. Now place your two collar pieces right sides together and pin all around the outer layers, making sure to catch this folded edge that we pressed under when we pin this side. Now we're going to sew all around the outside edges of the collar, leaving this bottom area open for now. From the pattern piece onto your fabric, you should have marked 2 small dots, and these 2 dots will help guide you as you pivot around these rounded corners. Sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now you're going to clip into these corners at the points where you pivoted, to but not through the stitching. And trim your seam allowances all the way around by about 1/2. Also clip into these curves around the top of your collar if you're doing this rounded collar version. Turn your collar right side out and give it a really good press. For your cuff piece, press one of the long edges to the wrong side by 1/2 inch. And then with that edge still folded under, continue to press it up 1 inch to the right side. Do this for both of your cuffs. Pin them in place, and then stitch all 4 of these short edges with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Remember to back stitch at the beginning and end of your stitching. Trim your seam allowances, and clip your bottom corners. Now turn these cuffs right side out, and give them a good press. Take your sleeve piece to your iron, and fold it in half so that you can press a memory crease from top to bottom. From the bottom of your sleeve, measure up to a point 2 inches away from the bottom, and mark that point along the center crease. Like the 2 top arms of a Y, make 2 marks at a 45-degree angle, measuring out 1/4 inch each from that center fold. Now carefully cut up this crease to your 2-inch mark, and also cut into each 45-degree 1/4 inch marking. Now with this slit we created, we should be able to open up our sleeve like this. So it now forms a straight line and we can attach the placket. Grab your placket piece and mark the center of one long edge. Match the right side of your placket to the wrong side of this sleeve opening, matching the centers and pin in place. Now continue pinning your placket to this opening. Your placket should extend beyond the opening by about 1/2 inch on both sides. Now sewing from the right side of the placket, sewing slowly and carefully at those 1/4 inch clippings so that you make sure to stitch just beyond them. We're going to sew the placket here with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and do this for both sleeves. Now take your sleeve to your iron, press this seam allowance from the seam that we just sewed toward the wrong side of your placket, and then fold the bottom edge of your placket up to the wrong side by 1/2 inch. Now with that bottom pressed edge still folded under, fold up the bottom of your placket once again so that it just conceals our stitching, and pin in place. Edge stitch this placket in place along this upper fold. Now that your placket is attached, you can trim off any excess fabric beyond the edges of the sleeve, and then fold this opening and sleeve right sides together, and pin the bottom of this opening in place. Now we're going to sew across this top edge of our placket at a 45-degree angle. Make sure you've repeated all of these steps for both of your sleeves. With the wrong sides of your sleeves facing you, baste one side of each of our plackets to either the right or left side so that we have a mirror image set. One side of my placket, I'm going to fold it over its seam to the left side and pin in place. And then for my other sleeve on the opposite side, I'm going to fold that side of the placket to the right side, again over its seam, and pin in place. And now take these pieces to your sewing machine and baste both of these bottom edges of these plackets in place. At the top of your sleeve, you should have notches indicating our gathering points. Sew gathering stitches with the longest stitch on your machine from point to point with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and do this for both sleeves. Now fold your sleeve right sides together and pin these short side seams. Sew your side seams with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then using your serger or a zigzag stitch, finish your seam edges. Now, just as we did for the top of our sleeve cap, we're going to sew gathering stitches around the bottom of the sleeve. So starting at the inner edge of one side of your placket, use the longest stitch on your machine again, and sew all around the bottom edge, stopping your stitching at the inner edge of the other side of your placket. Use a 1/4 inch seam allowance and do this for both of your sleeves. Grab your sleeve cuff and mark the center of the top side of your cuff that is not pressed under. Match the right side of your cuff to the wrong side of the bottom of your sleeve, matching centers. The center of the bottom of your sleeve will be that seam that we just sewed. Now pull your gathering stitches so that the bottom of your sleeve fits the length of your cuff on both sides. Once they're the same length and your gathers are distributed evenly, continue pinning in place. Do this on both sides of that center seam. Sew all the way around the bottom of your cuff with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, making sure not to catch this folded side of the cuff in your stitching, and do this for both sleeves. Trim your cuff seam by about half, and then push that seam to the inside of the cuff, and take this open end of your cuff, place it right over that seam over the stitches, just as we did when we sewed our placket, and pin in place all the way around. And now edge stitch this top folded edge of your cuff all the way around, and do this for both of your sleeves. For your cuffs, you can either sew buttonholes and add a button, or you can use cam snaps like I'm using. Place the side of the cuff where you folded your placket to the inside and basted earlier so that it overlaps the opposite side of your cuff. It should overlap by about 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to take the piercing tool that came with my cam kit and poke it through the cuff at the center of the cuff and at the center of this overlap. Now that I've pierced my fabric on both sides, I can apply the cam snap. Take one of the pointy pieces and poke it through that outside edge. Then I'm going to take the male piece, place it on top of that pointy end, and use my clamp tool to set that in place. And then I'll take my other pointy cam, place it on the inside of the fabric on the other side of the cuff, and take the female end, place it on top, use the tool again to clamp that in place. And now we can snap them and it's ready to go. Finish your other sleeve cuff in the same way. Now grab one of your front bodice pieces and one of your front waistband pieces and place them right sides together at the waistline and pin in place. Do this for both of your front bodices and waistband pieces and sew this seam with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Also attach your waistband to your back bodice piece in the same way. Trim all your seams by about half. Now open up your waistbands over the seam and press in place so that your seam allowances are facing your waistband. And do this for all 3 pieces. Top stitch each of your waistband pieces 1/8 of an inch away from this seam, catching that seam allowance as you sew. Do this for your back piece and both of your front pieces. Place your front bodice pieces right sides together with your back bodice piece. Align and pin your side seams. Sew your side seams with a 1/2 inch seam allowance and press the seams open. Grab your lining pieces and place your front bodice pieces right sides together with the back bodice piece. Pin your side seams, sew, and press them open in the same way. Grab one of your skirt pieces and fold it in half and press this center seam. Once you've created a crease with your iron, cut along that line. Now these 2 pieces will serve as your front skirt pieces. Now grab your uncut piece, the back skirt, and place your 2 cut pieces right sides together with this back piece, aligning the side seams, and pin in place. Sew both side seams with a 1/2 inch seam allowance and then using a serger or a zigzag stitch, finish your seam edges. I've gone ahead and pressed the bottom hem of my skirt 1/2 inch to the wrong side, and then additionally 1 inch to the wrong side, and now I'm going to pin across the bottom of the skirt. And then I'm going to edge stitch the hem of my skirt all along this inner fold from one side to the other. Sew gathering stitches all along the top edge of your skirt, starting a 1/2 inch from the edge of the skirt and stopping a 1/2 inch from the edge of the opposite side of the skirt, using again the longest stitch on your machine with about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now place the top of your skirt right sides together with the bottom of your bodice, matching center backs, pin in place. Just as we did for the bottom of the sleeve, pull your gathering stitches so that the skirt and the bodice are the same length. And once they're the same length and your gathers are distributed evenly, pin in place, matching your side seams and center fronts. Once you've gathered and pinned the entirety at the top of the skirt, take it to your sewing machine and baste these gathers in place from one side to the other. Grab your lining piece and place the right side of your lining on top of the wrong side of your skirt, matching the waistline seams. Now this lining and your main bodice are sandwiching your skirt in between. Pin from one side to the other, matching your side seams. Sew through all layers from one side to the other with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Place the front bodice piece of your lining right sides together with the back bodice piece of your lining, and pin together your shoulder seams. And sew your shoulder seams with a 1/2 inch seam allowance and press the seams open. Remember, we're just sewing our lining pieces together here. And then repeat the same steps for your main fabric. And now place your bodice lining and bodice main wrong sides together, turning your dress right side out. And now we're going to top stitch the bottom of the waistband all the way around, again 1/8 of an inch away from the seam, from your center front all the way around to your center front. Now go ahead and pin your lining and main fabric together all around the armhole and baste in place using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Do the same for your other armhole. Also pin your lining and main bodice together from the top of your center front to your waistline and around your neckline, and baste all the way around from your waistline to the center front, all the way around the neckline, and down the center front to your waistline again with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. For both of your button plackets, fold one long raw edge to the wrong side by 1/2 inch. Now place the unpressed edge of your button placket together with the center front of your dress so that the right side of your placket faces the inside of your dress. Pin in place so that the placket extends beyond the bottom of the dress by 1/2 inch. and sew this seam with a 1/2-inch seam allowance. Now take this seam allowance that you just created and press it toward the placket. At the bottom of your dress, fold your placket in half so that it's right sides together. And match it up along the edges so that the folded edge of the seam allowance that we pressed earlier and this new folded edge resulting from sewing the seam are flush with one another. And pin in place. Now we're going to sew a straight horizontal stitch, just sewing together the portions of the placket that are extending beyond the hem of the dress. So stitch that in place, careful not to catch your dress as you sew. Trim your seam and clip your corner, and turn your placket right side out, poking out your corner. Place this folded outer edge of your placket over this seam so that it just covers the stitches, and pin in place from top to bottom. And then edge stitch in place close to the inner edge of your placket. Follow the same exact steps for the other side of your dress to attach your placket. Place the unfolded raw edge of your collar right sides together with your neckline and pin in place. Continue pinning all the way to each center front. Sew this collar seam with a 1/2-inch seam allowance, being careful not to catch this folded edge of the collar as you sew this layer. Clip your corners, trim your seam, then place the folded edge of this collar piece just over the stitching line and pin in place all the way across. Edge stitch in place along the bottom fold of your collar piece. Alternatively, you could stitch in the ditch of the same seam from the outside of your garment, periodically checking underneath to make sure that you're catching this lining piece. From the outside of the garment, you'll get a cleaner finish this way. Now we're going to work on attaching the sleeves to our dress. Note that the side of your placket that is on top will point toward the back of the dress, and that's how you can know which sleeve will be attached to which armhole. So placing your sleeve and your bodice right sides together, pin the center of the top of your sleeve with your shoulder seam. And pin the side seam of your sleeve to the underarm seam of your bodice. Pin from the underarm to the point where we started our gathering stitches on the sleeve, because that portion of the sleeve will not be gathered. And do that on both sides of the underarm seam. And then you can start pulling your gathering stitches on either side of this shoulder seam. Once it fits, pin in place. Sew around your armhole with a 1/2-inch seam allowance and then serge to finish the raw edges. Attach your other sleeve to the dress in the same way. And now the very last step is to add either buttonholes and buttons or snaps to the front of your dress. You'll want the right side of your placket to overlap the left, and your bottommost button or snap will be about 2.5 inches from the hem of your dress. I'll place a mark for myself in chalk. The topmost button of your dress at the collar will simply be centered at the top edge of that collar. The first button below the collar will be about 5/8 of an inch away from the seam of your collar. The rest of the buttons in between will just be evenly spaced. Now that I've made my markings, I'm going to apply my snaps in the same way that I did for my sleeves, and then we're all done with the dress. Thank you so much for watching this sew along. Make sure you check out my other videos for more great sewing projects. I'll see you in the next video.